Our guest for today is the CEO and founder of Branzio Watches. He built this brand with a handful of pitfalls, experimenting with drop shipping and small e-commerce niches. However, now Branzio Watches has become a brand that is focused on longevity and, more notably, kindness. Listeners, help us welcome our guest, Ronnie Teja. Hey, Ronnie, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's going on?
Hi, we're so happy to finally have a session with you today. So, first off, let's start with a bit about yourself. Tell us your business story, Ronnie.
Yeah, sure, I could tell you my personal story and my business story. They're quite interconnected. My name is Ronnie Teja. Uh, I grew up in India. My family immigrated to Canada in about 2008. And when we immigrated to Canada, I remember one of the first sort of cultural shock that I had was we used to live in, a family of four live in somebody's basement for like $500 a month. And my first job, believe it or not, in Canada was picking blueberries. And I had never done a day of manual labor in my life. So I used to wake up at 4 a.m. and go and pick blueberries, basically. Something that I'd never done. I used to make $50 at the end of the day, and that used to go towards paying the rent and to help my parents with the groceries and the rent. Moved on from that. Taught myself door-to-door radio sales. So I used to go sell a door-to-door radio, not just any radio, Indian radio, Punjabi radio, language that I sort of spoke because I'm Sikh, but the thing is I never really spoke it till I got to Vancouver. Shame on me, I know. And yeah, and then taught myself digital marketing. Worked as the digital marketing manager for HSBC. Moved on from there. Worked at Best Buy as a digital marketing manager. Went and explored opportunities in Australia, working for the West Farmers Group. And then in 2014, 2015, said, you know what? I'm sick and tired of making other people money. I'm going to take a chance on myself. And somehow, my first business, which is Branzio, ended up being successful. So there's a lot of luck involved, and there is a lot of stories from the trenches here.
Wow. So, Branzio is your first venture, and is it kind of like a beginner's luck for you then?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll be honest. I mean, there's the right time, right place, and there's definitely one of those elements involved where when you look at things from a long-term perspective, it's like, okay, it was e-commerce, it was in its nascent stages in 2014, 2015. People were still trying to figure out how to, source from China, and I'd still say to this day, I mean, very lucky with my suppliers, very lucky with having the right kind of people in my court when I started. And furthermore, I think it was also a mixture of, the market fit. So watches back then, Instagram was just coming up. It's kind of like TikTok now. So all these influencer platforms becoming big. We'd invested a lot in influencer marketing. We'd invested a lot in Facebook ads. We'd invested a lot in all these other products which are just taking off in terms of online ads. And then uh, a little bit of luck, little bit of setbacks. Of course, everybody mentions their happy stories and fun stories. I mean, my setback was essentially the fact that, we were 3 months in. I was about to my last 10K in the account, and we start Kickstarter campaign in Vancouver by somebody who I didn't know in Vancouver, and then basically they had the same logo and the same watch style as us, and we had to go back to the drawing board. So, I had to like find a way to fly, not find, literally, I just bought a one-way ticket to Hong Kong, and I said, till the time I don't find a new watch supplier, I'm not getting back to Vancouver. So I basically went to Hong Kong, the Hong Kong watch fair, and then spent the next 2 months in Shenzhen sourcing, like talking to factories, one-on-one, building relationships. And that's how we launched the brand. And of course, I got lucky in terms of my suppliers give me credit, and being extremely trusting of me, which helped me along the journey.
So you mentioned the word lucky a couple of times now, but let me challenge that a little bit.
Sure.
Like listening to your story, it sounds like there's a lot of grit and a lot of hustle there, and it sounds like you're very much making your own luck. Am I right by saying that?
I mean, I'd sound too full of myself if I said there was hustle and everything else. I mean, there's also the right time and right place that you could be at times, right? So, in terms of e-coms, it's one of those things. I can't really take all the credit. The credit goes to my team. The credit goes to, my suppliers. and all that stuff. It's so for me it was basically I didn't know anything else, and it was just growing. Of course, this is something that you'll find funny. I mean, I used to live in Mumbai, so it was one of those things where if you have an Indian mom and you grow up in a city of 20 million people, you get pretty smart pretty quick in terms of finding ways to get lucky.
And you mentioned the suppliers now a couple of times and how lucky you are with them. But again, it sounds like you did your due diligence, you did your vetting, you went all the way to Hong Kong, spent time with them. And I guess when it comes to what we do, for instance, we're a marketplace which connects suppliers or vendors to clients. It's very interesting to understand on what made you choose your suppliers. How did you decide ultimately on who to work with?
Well, in some cases, I would say the supplier chose me, and the reason why I say so is this: there's a few reasons why, right? First of all, was also when I met these suppliers, it wasn't a one-way conversation of saying what's the price. Most people when they look at suppliers, it's a very lateral move, which is to say, hey, how much does it cost? How much is it going to cost to produce? How much is it going to cost to ship? And that's pretty much it. What my sort of experience was: who are you? What's your background? What does your family look like? Who do you have in your household? So more of the Asian way, which is to say, okay, how are you building a relationship from day one, so that you have a 6 to 10 year relationship, versus having a very transactional relationship. It was more of a family-driven relationship. Go have tea, go have, and what that relationship did for me in the long term was it gave me the opportunity to to get to know this family. And what came out of it was the fact that I told them I didn't have enough money in the bank account. I was pretty honest about it. And what they did was they extended me credit terms of $30,000. And because I had those credit terms where they could have lost money, right? They still said, don't worry about it. We'll take a chance on you. You're a young buck. You're up and coming. And then if things work out, the only deal I had with them was a handshake deal. It was like they won't have chased me up for the money. They won't have chased me up for anything else. But still, it was one of those things where they took a chance on me and they gave me a $30,000 line of credit, and that sort of got me, whatever $10,000 that I'd mentioned before that I had left in the bank account was all spent on ads. And that's where you sort of get the machine started, the machine rolling, which is basically like you have a washing machine. I mean, there's no other way of putting it, which is basically like you have a washing machine, you put money into it as much as possible, and you try and get a ROAS, return on ad spend, as much out of it as possible. So yeah, in that sense, yeah, I would say those are the people don't really care about these are nuances that maybe people in the West don't care about as much as they may in Asia. But I think that these are things I would encourage people to talk about, which would take them really, really far.
And so when you build this trusted and strategic relationships, right? You mentioned you started a machine, right? And I'm assuming by that you mean you were able to scale up
Yes.
in a digital manner. Can you tell us a little bit about that and your advice and your learnings maybe for our listeners on how you got from basically nothing, where you got a credit from somebody you met in Hong Kong, into a digital business that's selling itself?
Sure. A couple of different things happened here. Instagram was just coming up, and influencer marketing was just new back then. So your organic search, organic likes, everything else was quite new on the horizon. As a result of that, what happened as step 2, 3, 4 was the fact that I was able to scale Facebook ads and Instagram ads pretty quickly. Facebook was an open playground, which is essentially to say that there was no such thing as data issues or anything else. I mean, it's a good thing to have privacy, but back then it was just the Wild West. So that was probably one of the things that worked in my favor. Another thing I would say is Google Ads. Google's been our bread and butter, and we invest 50% of our budget into Google by default, because Google is a lot like whatever you say about Google, but Google is a lot more stable and a lot. Let's say they're quite technical in terms of how they're running the ad. So, for example, one of the things when I was in the States was everybody I spoke to or talked to was looking at the fact they're like, oh my God, we got hit by the Mac iOS update. We've been hit by iOS 14, iOS 14.5, iOS 15. How do we deal with it? Blah, blah, blah. Because there are a lot of brands that were born in the last 2 to 3 years that are so Facebook dependent that when this Mac rollout happened, they got affected. But for us, consistently, we've been putting 50 to 60% of our budget into Google Ads. But if you would ask me how much of our revenue is affected because of the iOS update, I would say zero. We've actually grown 10%, right? Or 15%, or whatever that magic number is. I think it's like 15%. But if you're saying, that your business is highly leveraged on Facebook ads, and I met a couple of entrepreneurs who've had to literally just close up shop and close the company because of the iOS updates. So you have to invest in platforms which have longevity. And part of the mentality in e-commerce or things in general are basically, people want to start stores, they want to start some form of drop shipping, outfit, and they expect to make money from day one, and they expect everything to be fine and dandy. And it's a 6 to 8 month process. And when I launched the brand, it was not supposed to be a brand that only lasted for a year. I had the vision, or let's say the motivation, to start something that had longevity to last for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And, it's only on year 7, but that's fine. I never expected to outlast year 7.
Together with the vision, Ronnie, was there also passion in there? Have you always been passionate about watches? Or passionate
No,
about...
I'm not passionate about what I do. I'll be super honest. It's a very transactional and e-com. No, I'll just be extremely honest with you. Like the back then, yeah, I cared about watches, but what I was more passionate about was finding new ad technologies that I could use to scale up a product. So it sounds very weird. I'm a guy who runs a watch brand, who's not even wearing a watch right now as this podcast is going on, and for me, it's more a focus of, can I take something and can I build it, right? Can I take a product and scale it as quickly as possible? I mean, if you want to, it's a very brutal answer, but that's what it is. And to a large extent, it's also, it just comes down to the fact that, you meet people who are like, oh my God, I'm so passionate about business, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, sure, man, all the power to you. But like, why do I wake up in the morning? I wake up to scale this company, to make money, to have a great lifestyle, which is free of all borders, and
look at you traveling everywhere.
Yeah, sure, and to be able to leave a legacy. That is my motivation. The watches, I mean, they're nice watches. I'll wear them out, not for sport for now, but yeah, but if you were to like level with yourself and give an honest answer, this is my answer.
And that's
I'd love
remarkable.
to sugarcoat it and sound like a tech bro on this podcast, but unfortunately I'm not, and that's the honesty of it.
And we love the brutal honesty, and also it's a good perspective, right? Because you're right. A lot of people come to us and say you have to be extremely passionate about the exact problem you're solving, but different people are driven in different ways, right? It's very cool to see this, and whatever motivates you, and we can align to this, right? We're very passionate about what we do, but we also all have different motivations, right? We can definitely relate.
Correct.
A couple of things that really stuck with me is it seems like you really like to invest in longevity. It seems to be a very, strategic approach for you. But on top of that, a couple of things that went your way, which you then capitalized on. Like you mentioned, the privacy situation a couple of years back. But how about COVID? Did you capitalize on that, or did that actually impact you in a negative way?
No, I mean, COVID was really good for us. To be honest with you, I mean, our company grew by leaps and bounds. I would say we grew by almost 100%. So for us, even as a mature company, if we're growing by 100% after a few years of COVID, I'd say I call that a win in my books. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where if I were to look at, did we take advantage of people during COVID, having COVID sales and all that? I think that's that's a really shit thing to do. And there was people who were having these COVID sales and all that kind of stuff. E-commerce in general as a category grew 30 to 40%, which I think is a great thing for the whole industry in general. People got more comfortable with online shopping. People got more comfortable with the whole process, and that's a phenomenal thing. But in general, would I have taken advantage of somebody's misery? I don't think so. That is just to do so because it's unethical in our books or anybody else's books. What I would suggest is, the industry as a whole has grown, and the multiples that are coming out of the industry right now have definitely gone up. It's a seller's market. The valuation's about 6 to 8x, the highest they've ever been. And I think overall it's a big win for us.
And I think it's noteworthy to mention as well that Branzio Watches donates a part of its sales to charity. So for every watch that is sold by Branzio Watches, they donated to charity.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I personally was quite passionate about. I traveled to Africa a few years ago, and I was living in southern Africa, in Cape Town, and I had the opportunity to go visit the Okavango Delta and the Kruger National Park. And when I was there, within the first hour of us being there, we actually saw an elephant and a rhino being poached. And that was something that really got to me. It's like, we are here in the middle of nature. It's beautiful. We're seeing these amazing things. And then all of a sudden, you see a dead rhino along the way, and you're like, holy hell, man, this is the stuff that people show you on TV, but people are not really aware of as to what's going on. So, that was the day. This was about 4.5 years ago, and I made a pledge that, we're going to be donating to animal conservation. And if you were to donate, right, people just usually donate to an organization. So the way our donation system works is quite a lot different. So it would work with us or one of our managers donating their time. So for example, if it were me, I'll give you an example. I'll go live in an orphanage for about 2 weeks. I'll work there. I'll, find out what their biggest pain points are, what the issues are, etc., etc. And at the end of my, period of stay there, then I because I worked there for a volunteer there and lived there for like, let's say a couple of weeks, I kind of have an idea of what the biggest pain point is and what they need the most. So for example, this orphanage I went to and did this about 6 months ago, they needed a washing machine because the old washing machine was broken and made a bunch of noise. So I just went there, bought them a washing machine and bought some books for the kids. So that's how we give back. It's not about just donating to a WWF or something else and making yourself feel good, because when money does come filtering in from, let's say, the World Bank to WWF, and the actual people who are actually getting impacted by it is that dollar turns into 10 cents. So I would rather be putting my money where it has a client's money or
Directly.
whatever, where it has the maximum amount of impact. So
Well,
that's how we do our corporate social responsibility versus, taking the easy way out, saying, hey, look at me, virtue signaling you and saying this is the amount of money that we have, and that's how we are doing it, which I don't think is the right way to do so. But that's me.
well, we're loving it. We love what you're doing, Ron. And please
Appreciate it.
consider making sports watches in the future down the line. Walter and I both wear sports watches. Please,
Yeah, I mean,
Branzio
our
watches.
watches are interchangeable. I mean, it's just like we do make interchangeable strap watches, right? One's leather and the other one's a nano strap, which you can wear. So the idea behind the whole watch company was to be able to go from the office to the outdoors. So that's the concept behind it. It's just I'm not wearing one because gym, and I don't want to damage the watch.
Got it. And maybe to switch gears into as your company scaled up, you said no, you're 6 years old, and as things became more remote and work from home has become more of a thing, I'm sure your vendors are not where you're staying geographically and all that. Have you also actually, how much of what you did you keep in-house, and how much of what you do is actually outsourced to partners?
Initially, it was all outsourced, and then look, your audience might hate me for this, and you guys may too. But but for me as an entrepreneur, I felt more comfortable taking things in-house, right? When I started, of course, there was Upwork, and we'd outsource our developers, we'd outsource our design, we'd outsource everything. And then as we grew up, as we sort of leveled up. We said, okay, we're going to keep the key pieces in house, and that was very important for me. The second aspect was that we ended up saying, okay, so for example, like Christmas, like right now, our design team's super loaded, right? The guys don't have any bread. I can sense there's a burnout coming. That's when we would outsource, and we would say, okay, right? I can sense this pressure on the team. So this is the perfect time to be outsourcing, because it's one of those things where we'd be able to help out with the workload. And once we're able to do that, it kind of helps out. It's a seasonal thing. It works for 2 months, and then we're good to go from there. Right? So that's how we would outsource. If I were to say, like, what is outsourcing strategy, that would be outsourcing strategy. You don't want your core team and your core customers and your core people to get burnt out. And when I sense that sort of that burnout phase is coming, then we need to be able to take the corrective action to be able to mitigate that ahead of time. And that you won't know from day one. It's something that comes with business experience, with all that kind of stuff.
And I mean, I would consider having suppliers, for instance, as outsourcing as well. How many suppliers do you work with, and how big is your team, if we may ask?
Our team's about 40 people, all in-house. Suppliers in terms of watches, do you mean, or suppliers in terms of contractors?
Watches. Yeah. How do you make your watches?
We manufacture them in China. I've got two suppliers, and I haven't changed them for the last 7 years, and they've never raised the prices on me. Like most of the people have been through that process, the rigmarole. I haven't had no issues, because I've told them from day one, if we know how much things cost. If labor costs rise, I'll understand. Which we'll go with the inflation rate or whatever it is, but we definitely will not pay you. Don't try and screw me over, and they have not. So it's a very frank conversation, to be honest.
And why would you work with two suppliers out of interest? Are they doing the same thing, or they have two separate skill sets?
Yeah, they were the guys who helped me.
Do they do this?
Sorry?
Do they do the same thing for you, or do they do separate things?
They do the same thing for me. So if one factory is loaded, I mean, we just shipped out 1 millionth order. So it's one of those things, right? It's like, so to be very clear, in my books, loyalty is quite a big thing. Loyalty and longevity, of course. And when I got started, these are the two guys who helped me out the most. And it's not a matter of optimizing. Like, a lot of people chase the dollar and say, I'm optimizing my processes, I do X, Y, Z. Fair, sure enough, all the power to you, right? But loyalty also is pretty highly ranked. So at any point of time, I have a credit note worth a couple of $1 million with any one of my suppliers, and which no other person, I can guarantee you, in the e-commerce business would get from a Chinese supplier.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it's that easy. Yeah, I mean, go ahead, go find me somebody who has that. Unless you're like a $150 million company, or even a $500 million company who has a credit note with a Chinese supplier at any point in time. Yeah, sure, go ahead, show me somebody. But
Fantastic.
that's what I said.
So
Loyalty.
you are now enjoying the fruits of all the investment you've made early on, right?
Yeah,
In making a long-term bet on everything, right?
it is a long-term bet.
And now, excellent.
And from suppliers to outsourcing, going back to outsourcing, Ronnie, now that your team has grown and your business has grown, when you reach a point that you decide to outsource, do you turn to freelancers, or do you prefer to outsource to an agency vendor?
We've done freelancing, we've done agencies. It just depends on the luck of the draw.
Depends on the type.
I would prefer freelancers to a large extent, and the reason why I would say freelancers are better than agencies, because agencies tend to overcharge, unfortunately, and that's their business model. I mean, all the power to them, and they upsell you on all the BS. But yeah, I work for an agency at one point of my career. I know how agencies charge, and I think it's a complete bullshit model. There's some agencies that I think are so out there, but like, for example, if you need to have an agency that does like YouTube ads, right? Like, that is a very specific specific ask, which needs very specific
Sure.
uh, sort of specialization. So if you're gonna go and make some videos with like say Harmon Brothers, which made like Pupuri, or which made like something like what's the other one, like Scotty Potty or something, right? Completely viral, completely like insane. That's one example. The other example is I met these guys from a company called William Painter, like freaking amazing guys. They broke YouTube. They did 175 million plus views on YouTube. And I'm like, where did he make your ad? He's like, I made it in house. I'm like, how much did the ad cost? 15 grand. How many freelancers did he use? One for the production company. That's it. So there's two sides of the same coin. Different sides of the same coin. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. Well, we're already, almost time, Ronnie. This is probably one of my last questions. You seem to have like a natural flair for entrepreneurship. Who can you say has been your biggest mentor so far in your
My
entrepreneurial journey?
mom. It sounds so weird. It sounds so weird if I say that. People are going to be like, you're a mama's boy. But no, it's my mom. Yeah, I'm not even shitting you. This lady used to take me through the streets of Mumbai every damn day. And she used to basically make me haggle with every damn shopkeeper for how to buy fruits and vegetables. And once you start doing that, man, you kind of realize very quickly how much you're being chipped for. So exactly. So I know exactly when people are taking advantage of me. It's like whatever the price is, you always cut it down by 1/4. That's the usual rule of thumb. That's the Indian mom rule of thumb. I'm sure every Asian mom is the same way. Yeah, you have to go that way. It's like, yeah, and just like it's my father was in the army. I mean, he'd worked the same job for 35 years. He's definitely not an entrepreneur. He's a systems guy. He likes being in the system. He likes likes being within boundaries. My mom, completely different. Completely. I mean, here's an example. Like my mom just turned 60 and she just started a PhD. So I personally have like really big shoes to fill.
That is
Amazing.
fascinating. And maybe one thing to add to that, right? A lot of our listeners are actually either running startups or aspiring entrepreneurs, or in the SME space. What would be your advice actually for anyone that wants to run a successful 6-year-old business?
A successful 60. I don't know if I'm successful, man. I mean, there's still a long way to go, but I would say uh, hire the right management team. Everybody says hire right, sure, but hiring the right management team is extremely important for your mental and your physical well-being. And if you're not able to do that, you're going to constantly be under some sort of stress. You're constantly be able to like not focus on a business. I understood, year 4 coming into it when I hired a consultant to come in and implement like the entrepreneurial operating system or whatever it's called, to come in and implement the system, and which said, okay, maybe I need to be working on the business. And I never understood what it meant till I went through that whole process. So working on the business essentially means you look at your business from a high level. You don't even need to worry about suppliers or anything else. You're working on creating a brand. You're working on growing eyeballs for your company. How are you going to do it? What is the strategy? So and working in the business would be something, would be like, oh, I've got to reply to this email. I've got to change this campaign. You don't want to waste your time with that shit. Your biggest asset as an entrepreneur is your mind. And the thing is, if you are gonna you're gonna use your mental energy on all doing all these menial tasks on a daily basis. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. You should get your hands dirty, because I did, and I was doing Google ads and I've done Facebook ads and everything else. But I found myself a lot more effective for the business when I moved to that next level. So that's my 2 cents.
I love that advice, and I think a lot of people will too. Awesome.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ronnie. And that's all for today's episode. Thanks again for listening, guys. And again, to Ronnie Teja for joining us today. It was a very enlightening session, truly. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
One,
I appreciate it.
we appreciate it too. Thank you. And once again, this is Jacqueline DeMonk.
And I'm Wouter Delbare.
And stay tuned for the next episode of Mangtas Nation.